Okay, so this is part 6 of the study guide, and in this one we're going over population ecology. First thing I want to go over are these two graphs right here, and this graph, this first one up top, this would be a J-curve, and this bottom one right here would be an S-curve. And I want to go over what these two graphs show when we're looking in population ecology, okay? Go ahead and erase these real quick. So what this J-curve shows us right here, this is graph number 1. What this graph shows us is it shows us a few things about the population. Number 1 is showing us that the growth is exponential. And it's not linear. If you remember, a linear graph would look something like this. That's what a linear graph would look like. Well, this J-curve, this is showing us that the population is growing faster and faster as time goes on. So that growth would be exponential. The other thing that it shows us is that the growth of that population is unchecked. Okay? There are no limiting factors yet. There hasn't been anything to stop or slow the growth of the individuals in that population. Okay? Now, when we look at graph number 2 over here down at the bottom, this is the S-curve. And what this shows us is, yes, there's a fast exponential growth starting off, but later on, as the growth starts to slow down and plateau, this right here, this shows us that that growth has reached its carrying capacity, okay? And the carrying capacity is the maximum amount of individuals an area could hold. And what determines the carrying capacity would be its limiting factors, okay? So it could be anything. It could be the amount of resources in the area, could be the space in the area, could be increased competition, could be the predators. Any of those things would determine where this carrying capacity would be, okay? Any of those would determine, if there's a abundance of resources, then the carrying capacity may be higher. If there's a very, very low amount of resources, then the carrying capacity would be much lower, okay? So in essence, when we're talking about the carrying capacity, what determines where the carrying capacity is? Well, that would be the limiting factors, okay? So the limiting factors determine where that carrying capacity will be at for the population. And next we look at the two types of limiting factors. The first type is density dependent, and the second type is density independent. What we're talking about by density is we're talking about the number of members of the population. So if there's a high density of members in the population, and that causes limiting factors, then that would be density dependent, okay? So let me give you a couple examples. Density dependent would be anything that limits the population that is caused by the population, okay? So here's some examples. Number 1 would be resources or competition for resources, okay? If there's too many individuals in the area and they all use up all the resources, well then there's going to be two things. There's going to be lack of resources and there may be competition, okay? Spread of disease. There's a lot of individuals in an area and they're in close proximity to each other, then infectious disease will get spread much, much more faster, okay? Now when we look at density independent, density independent factors are anything that happen by chance, okay? So the key word in here is chance. It's not caused by the population. So what are some things that happen by chance that may limit a population? Well, that would be any of the natural disasters. So we're talking storms, we're talking hurricanes, tsunamis, wildfires, anything like that happens by pure chance that limits the population. That would be density independent, okay? Okay, and next we're going to talk about causes of human population growth. And if you remember the graph that I showed you before of the history of human population, you can see that the history of human population starts off pretty low, and it doesn't go up very much. And then all of a sudden, once we get closer to modern day, it skyrockets way up here. And what that shows us is human population is closer to a J curve, okay? So it's closer to exponential growth, or it actually is exponential growth. And what that shows us is the human population hasn't reached its carrying capacity yet. So we haven't reached the max number of individuals, of humans, that the Earth could sustain. I would suspect that we're getting close, but data shows we haven't reached that yet. So what were the three things that led to human population growth? Well, the first one that we talked about, number one, is agriculture. So how did agriculture affect human population growth? Well, before agriculture, if people wanted to eat, they had to go find it. They were hunters and gatherers, so they had to go out and hunt their food, or they had to go forage for berries or fruits. So with the development of agriculture, people didn't have to go and search for food. They could stay where they're at on their little plot of land and have their farm, and food wasn't an issue. You're going to have less deaths by lack of food, because now you have so much food in abundance. So, and I mentioned this before, instead of recruiting workers to work on your farm, because having farms is a lot of work, families just simply had more children. They had larger families, so they had more hands on the farm. They don't need to pay them. All they need to do is just feed them, and they have their workforce for their farm. Now, that brought on another problem, though. So people are going to die less from starvation. Families are going to have more children because they need the work and they have the food to support the children. But now with agriculture, now people started living in closer proximity to animals, and that could have some health risks of its own because of bacteria and disease. So this led to the second contributor to human population growth, which is knowledge of disease. So how did this help? Well, it helped in two ways. Number one, people were more aware that they needed to be sanitary. So they were more aware of, the cleanliness and their personal hygiene, things like that. Well, that would be under sanitation. And sanitation would prevent people from getting sick. Okay, so they're going to slow the spread of disease by having sanitation and good personal hygiene. And another way knowledge of disease helped was medicine. So with antibiotics and treatments, sanitation would help prevent sickness. But now if you accidentally got sick along the way, there was still hope. You still had treatment. You could still get better, okay? So sanitation would prevent sickness, and medicine would treat sickness, okay? And the last contributor to human population growth was industrialization. Okay? And when we talk about industrialization, what we're talking about is people stopped living in small little villages, and there started to be more industry, there started to be more factories. And how this would help is, this would help the production of food and the production of goods. So you can make goods much, much more faster. And not only that, but this helped with transportation. Now we could send those goods, across country or just about anywhere we needed to. So this would help with, foods or treatments or medicine or anything like that. We could thank industrialization for us having the availability of certain goods.